Hello, and welcome to the Project Good podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Hilton. Project Good is a social impact podcast interviewing experts and advocates about the pressing problems that we face globally and hearing how they suggest we move forward in the future. The Project Good podcast is brought to you by Project Good Work. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people and organizations to develop a mindset that can move others to positive action regarding the complex issues facing the people and the planet. For this December, we're focusing on the organization of the year, food yoga. Hunger in the world is on the rise. Recent reports indicate the number of people facing hunger has increased significantly over the past years. As of 2023, between 713 and 757 million people were undernourished, which is approximately 152 million more than in 2019, according to the World Health Organization, or WHO. Several factors contribute to this rise in hunger, including ongoing conflicts, climate change, economic downturns, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022 alone, as many as 783 million people faced hunger. The situation is particularly dire in Africa, where 1 in 5 people face hunger, a rate more than twice the global average. Regions like South Asia and Africa south of the Sahara have one of the highest levels of hunger, with nearly no progress made since 2015. The ability to access healthy diets is also deteriorating. Over 3.1 billion people are unable to afford a healthy diet as of 2021. If current trends continue, it's projected that about 582 million people will be chronically undernourished by 2030. This underscores the urgent need for a global effort to address the root causes of hunger and food insecurity. Food Yoga is an organization with a mission to bring peace and prosperity in the world through the liberal distribution of pure plant-based meals prepared with loving intentions. Food Yoga Internationally, formerly Food for Global Life, pursues its mission by providing organizational and operational support to vegan hunger relief affiliate projects around the world. With the help of its affiliates, the organization has served over 8 billion meals, tackling hunger by addressing everything from nutrients to spirit. With over 30 years, Paul Turner, who is the founder of Food Yoga, has dedicated his life to helping eradicate hunger globally. He's a true humanitarian, looking at the problem from a holistic level, from measuring the impact with his company, The Kindly Ecosystem, to helping develop conscious consumerism through his company, OM Guarantee. Through his life, Paul has taken every experience he went through and made it add value back to humanity. From starting as a digital artist, being a monk, becoming an author of several books, to founding multiple companies, it's clear that Paul is here on the planet to help take it to a higher level. Let's get into the interview. Food Yoga Internationally, formerly Food for Global Life, is a non-profit vegan food relief organization founded in 1994 to serve as the headquarters for Food Yoga International projects. Its network of 291 affiliates span the globe, with projects occupying over 65 countries. Volunteers provide over 1 million free meals daily. Food Yoga International engages in various sorts of hunger relief, including outreach to the homeless, provisions for disadvantaged children through India, and provisions for victims of natural disasters around the world. With roots in India, the Food Yoga is a modern, daily revival of the ancient Vedic culture of hospitality, of service to those in need. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Paul Turner, founder of Food Yoga, who's the author of the best-selling book, Food Yoga. He has conducted numerous on-site emergency food relief efforts, traveled and worked in over 73 countries, wrote the manual on food relief management and trained people worldwide, and continues to push himself to higher levels. Welcome, Paul.
Yeah, thank you so much for the lovely welcome. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you because food is one of my favorite things.
Well, of course, it's everyone's favorite thing. It's like, that's why the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. The center of the house is the kitchen. It's a set that the foundation of every culture is their food. So yeah, it's why it's important.
Yes, it is one of my favorite things. I I love cooking. I love reading about it. I love the Top Chef competitions. I love, learning different cultures, how things are served. I can go on and on about food.
No, I understand. I think most people are the same.
Yes. So one of the things I thought that was interesting about you, before we dive into the question, is that you started out actually in, I would say, being an artist, a graphic artist at that. So what a leap, I guess, from, the beginning of your professional life to where you are now. I guess, what turned you on to food besides the fact that, you like to eat?
Well, I mean, from my childhood, I was a cartoonist. I always had this idea that I was going to become a cartoonist when I grew up. So I always had this passion for like expressing myself through drawing. Later on, that became through writing, but initially it was through just drawing pictures. I would express myself that way. And then, of course, as you noted, I took a very radical turn at the age of 19. I became a monk. And so spirituality became a very important part of my life, directing my life. And through that process of being a monk, I continued my creative sort of side. I continued fueling my creative side. And I got into not drawing so much, but more writing and communicating through the written word in a very creative way. And finding ways to express spiritual concepts in a way which was very appealing and palatable to the lay person. That became like the way I was expressing my creativity. And so as a monk, and I wasn't your average monk, I was, as I said, I started off just pen and paper, traditional graphic design. And then as a monk, I trained myself how to do graphic design on the computer. And then I built the first website for the charity, and I was still a monk at the time in 1995. So I always had this way of this passion for creative expression, and it just took different forms over the years.
Yes, I was noticing that like I was like, at heart, you really are an artist, but an artist, I guess art itself is a communication piece of the state of humanity, and also, if you really do a deep dive, or as Michelangelo would say, is a moment to touch, the higher realms, or touch God, and bring that communication down in a form of beauty.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's a famous reference to him where he says that he saw David, like the artists, they see the end result before it's actually manifested. Like I was recently in Italy, and I looked at the statue of David, and it's just one big stone that's been converted into this beautiful statue of David, and it's amazing. And it was in the mind's eye of the artist before it actually manifested physically. So it's a beautiful thing about humanity, is that we can express ourselves in this way very uniquely, which makes us very individual, and it adds color. It adds color to the grand fabric of humanity. We're all very different. We're all in the same race, but we're all very, very different, the way we're perceiving it and participating.
Yes. And the statue of Decio David, because I've been to Italy and I stood by it. That thing is massive, and I'm just like, wow.
It's incredible.
Yes.
And he saw that in his mind's eye before he actually did it. I mean, you just, you look at those things and they're just chiseling away, and they made that thing happen. It's not like pieces put together. It's one big single piece of stone.
I know, and it just feels like you can hold David's hand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's a pretty big guy.
Yes. So now diving into food yoga, I guess let's even talk about, I guess, because recently you guys changed the name of the organization. So I guess, why did you change the name?
Well, we were, for the longest time, we were known as Food for Life Global. The story is that when I first became a monk in 1983, there was a very grassroots project. It wasn't even called Food for Life at the time. It was just ISKCON Food Relief, and it was really just a few projects around the world feeding people from soup kitchens from the temples. The initial project was inspired by an event which took place in 1974. There were some children, some poor village children, fighting with dogs over scraps of food that was thrown out from the back of the temple. And a swami called Swami Prabhupada saw these children fighting with the dogs with sticks, trying to get some of the remnants of, the remains of this feast that was served at the temple. And he was shocked by this. He said, "Oh my God, this can't happen. Nowhere where there's a temple, we should allow people to go hungry." So that next day he said, "Look, we need to start a food relief project, and we need to feed the local people so that everyone in the area gets fed. No one should go hungry." So that was sort of the initial inspiration behind what we now know as Food Yoga International. And it expanded in a few different places in India, and a few places like Sydney, New York. There was a couple of projects in major cities around the world, but it was very grassroots still. It wasn't really organized. It wasn't very formalized. When I became a volunteer, it was at that state. And then fast forward a few years, I helped to start to develop it. And I wrote a training manual, and I left Australia to set up a headquarters, which we then created the headquarters called Food for Life Global in Washington, D.C. in 1994. And so for the longest time, we were known as Food for Life Global. But then recently, we rebranded because I wanted to emphasize the concept of food yoga. Because food yoga became, after I wrote the book Food Yoga in 2013, to explain the concept of this more spiritual relationship that people can have with their food, more intimate connection they can have with their food. I wanted to make that front and center, like the food philosophy of the charity, like establish that as a principal feature of our charity, that we're not just filling bellies, which many food relief charities are doing around the world, but we're actually trying to shift consciousness and nourish mind and soul as well. It's not simply just about the physicality of the food. It's a subtle aspect, which seeing food as a carrier of intention, and it can actually shift consciousness. So that became known then as Food Yoga. And I wanted to emphasize that in the name of the actual organization, Food Yoga International, so that we make it clear that it's not just about filling bellies. The solution to world hunger is not simply about filling stomachs, but it's about shifting consciousness. It's about using food as a medium, as a carrier of intention, as a way to unite people. It's a great uniter. It's a great communicator. It can break through all language barriers. It's the thing which connects us all. We may have different political views. We may speak a different language, but we can all gather around a table of beautiful food prepared with love and enjoy that and feel united as a family or as a community. So that's the power of food. If we want to expand that globally by creating this sort of global dinner table where we're all united as a humanity, as earthlings, around pure plant-based food prepared with a loving intention, and we all have this one thing in common that we can all agree on. Good food is good for the body. Good food can make us feel better. It can nourish our spirits, our minds, and that sort of thing. So food yoga, the concept of food yoga, that philosophy of food philosophy, is the front and center of this organization. So although we're very good at filling bellies, we, as you mentioned in the introduction, we can feed. Well, our affiliates are currently serving over 1 million meals every day, and these are freshly cooked plant-based meals prepared that day, served directly to the public. Over 1 million meals go out every day. We're very cost efficient in that. But on top of that, we have a real tangible, solid solution to solving world hunger. And that is creating this sense of unity in the world. Because if there is this sense of unity, this brotherhood, sisterhood, if that can be cemented with the idea of like sharing food, then things like hunger can disappear overnight. Poverty can disappear overnight. If we actually feel united as a global citizenship, as earthlings, hunger can disappear overnight. That's the only way to solve hunger, because there's plenty of food in the world.
Yes. I love the fact that you guys bring in the spiritual aspect of food, which I think is lost. It goes back to the saying on a deeper level of you are what you eat.
Exactly.
But it takes it to the level then of I also, and one of the things, and you are speaking to the choir, I always say that food is the one equalizer across the planet, because we all must eat, because we are human, and if we plan to still stay alive, we must do this. And there's it doesn't matter who you are, we all have to sit at the table, and when you sit at the table, you're at the same level, no matter rich, poor, black, white, whatever, because it is what makes us human. It is what built our bodies from birth to adulthood.
Exactly.
And so food is at the foundation of if we want to have a healthy humanity. And speaking of that, I'm sure you have tons and tons of opinions about how currently our food system must change.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of opinions there. I mean, the fact is, most people follow what's called the SAD diet, the standard American diet, which is filled with processed foods which are denatured. They're not in their natural state. They're not how God intended them to be. And we're filling ourselves up with this like unnatural so-called foods and thinking that we're nourishing our body, and we're not. And we're certainly not nourishing our mind or our spirit because of the way that these things are processed. So when it comes to nourishing mind and spirit, the factor that's important to consider here is how the food is prepared. You see, it's a subtle ingredient of the intention and the energy which is invested in preparing that food. That is one of the ingredients, or some of the ingredients, which go into the meal and affect us on a subtle level, on a psychological, spiritual level. And a lot of people don't consider that. They just think about the vitamins and minerals and the proteins and that sort of thing. But that's okay on a physical level, but that's not who we are in total. We're more than simply a physical body. And we all have this experience. And the example I give to people is, and this is coming from my spiritual upbringing as a monk, and that is, at one point in time, each one of us was a baby. And I'm sure in our mother's mind, she still sees us as the little girl that she brought into the world, or the little boy that she brought into the world. And she has that feel, she has that connection with us on that deep level. But the fact is, our body has changed. We're now a young man or an old man or an old woman or a young woman. So physically the body has changed, but the person inside is the same. So the fact is, we're more than simply a physical body. We're animated as a spiritual person, as a spiritual being. We're animating physical form. It's due to the presence of the soul that makes a physical body animate, that makes it alive. It's the difference between a dead body and a live body. It's the presence of a soul. So these things are important to consider when we're talking about nourishment. If we're just nourishing the physical body, we're only nourishing one aspect of who we are in total. So that's why at Food Yoga, at Food Yoga International, that's such an important part of our mission, is not just filling bellies, although we're good at that. It's shifting consciousness and nourishing the spirit and the mind as well. purifying minds, and nourishing the spirit. So when we talk about the food system, the biggest problem is the standard American diet, which is pushed on us, which seems to be, this is bringing out the conspiratorial side of my personality, because the fact is, the health industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and all these different industries are built upon the idea of keeping people sick, keeping them in a state where they're disconnected, or they're not operating optimally, and they need something to help them. They need to be, sold a product to help them, whether it's a pain relief or something to help them with their digestion. It's like selling chemicals to them to like keep them as customers for the rest of their life. And if we eat a healthy diet, we shouldn't typically we shouldn't really even need to see a doctor, because nature's the greatest healer. And the way that God created us was to give us a body which was perfectly designed to heal itself if given the right opportunity. So, for example, fasting is considered to be one of the greatest cures of all diseases. When you fast, you basically give your body the opportunity to focus its energy on healing that particular ailment in the body, that, removing that toxin, expelling that toxin from the body. When it's given the opportunity, it can do that. But when you're filling your body with chemicals and you're constantly feeding yourself with all these chemicals, then the body doesn't have a chance to expel those toxins from the system, for example. So, we need to get back to nature as much as possible. We need to eat foods according to their natural state as much as possible. Limit the amount of processed foods, if not expel them completely from your diet, so that your body can process the nourishment, the nutrients from that food properly and efficiently, and you get the full benefits. And then things which plague us to this day, like diabetes and different things which are really lifestyle diseases, they won't exist. They won't exist. Cancer it's a lifestyle disease. It's something which is not natural to the body, and it's a result of bringing in chemicals or toxins into the system, which then create a very acidic sort of environment in the body, which is a perfect environment for cancer to flourish. And if you're living a healthy lifestyle and eating foods in their natural state, then your body is naturally in an alkaline state, which is repelling diseases like cancer, for example.
Yes, you bring up a lot of good points. I'm going to start from the beginning. You talk about the difference between just filling stomachs. So, having food, here's some food, but then there's the attachment of intention. And what I think about it, it's like I always tell the secret ingredient when I cook, and people are like, that's good. It didn't taste the same when I made it. I said that's because I added love.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't measure that. That's the thing. It's very intangible. And it's one of the challenges for people to accept that. It's like, well, I can't really measure it. It's like, how do you quantify that, right? But you'll be interested to know that there's a whole area of science now. There's literally thousands of scientists around the world studying the power of intention, and how intention, our thoughts, our motivations can actually impact physical reality. There's literally many thousands of scientists around the world now studying this field. It's very well documented in a book by Lynn McTaggart, and two of her books. One is called The Intention Experiment, another one is called The Field, and she documents this, how scientists now are starting to realize how our mind, our intentions can actually affect physical reality. So there's actually scientific proof that something does take place, something happens. When you have the right mindset and you have these loving feelings, those feelings are one of the ingredients that go into the meal, therefore physically changing that meal.
Yes, there's a study, you've probably already seen this, that you can, people can just, I forget what university or what the exactly study was, but they did it with water, and you could say words to water.
Yeah, Dr. Emoto from Japan, he
Yes.
started off that whole experiment. He started. Actually, there's a few different participants in this. There's another gentleman called Cleve Dexter. He didn't specifically study water, but Cleve Dexter was a CIA interrogation specialist from the 60s, and he used to operate the lie detector test, the polygraph test, right? So when he would interrogate people, he'd hook them up to the polygraph machine and see if they were telling the truth or not. So at one point in time, he got bored with his job and he thought, I wonder what would happen if I connected this to a plant. Just out of a whim, he just decided to connect this to a plant. So he connected it to a plant. And without actually saying anything, he just started thinking certain thoughts, like, I'm going to burn you, I'm going to cut you. And when he did that, the plant actually picked it up. The plant picked up the thoughts, and the meter on the polygraph machine started shaking, like reacting like as if the plant was screaming. And this was shocking to him. He had a sort of suspicion, and I think at that time there was already well documented that plants had a certain level of consciousness, but that level of consciousness, understanding that was very, very limited. But they knew that plants had some sort of awareness because obviously the plant is moving towards the sun. It's able to break through cement to reach, water sources. Plants do have consciousness, but the level of that consciousness was sort of not clearly understood. But when he did this test, he thought, oh my God, plants really do have a developed consciousness. They were actually picking up on his thoughts. And then a few decades later, Emoto had a suspicion that water, well, I think it came from the idea that historically we all are pretty aware of homeopathy. Most people are aware of the science of the practice of homeopathy, where water is exposed to a particular element, and that particular element is removed from the water, but the energetic signature remains. So when you take a homeopathic remedy, it may have, for example, there's even homeopathic remedies for vaccines, where the vaccine is like whatever that vaccine is in the water, or that plant is is exposed to the water, then it's removed, but the energetic signature, the memory of that thing remains in the water. That's the whole basis of homeopathy. So Emoto thought, well, that's, and it has a long history of homeopathy. It's been around for a long time. But no one had really done the scientific research to substantiate these claims. It was more about, well, it works, it makes me feel better, therefore I believe it. But there was no scientific evidence to support these claims. So he decided to test the theory and expose water to different vibrations, and then freeze the water and look at the crystal structure. This was his method. And when he looked at the crystal structure, he saw that water that was exposed to positive vibrations, for example, thank you, I love you, something positive, the crystal structure was very symmetrical. And water that was exposed to negative vibrations, I hate you, you're ugly, you're a bad person, whatever it is, something negative, the crystal structure was asymmetrical, it was distorted, it was fractured. And then he thought, well, what if I tested water without even exposing it to a sound vibration? What if I just looked at water from different sources around the world? So he took water from a glacier, water from a tap, water from different parts of the world, and he did the same test. And again, when the water was in a clean environment, the crystal structure was very symmetrical. And when he took water from a dirty source like a dirty river or a tap, the crystal structure was very distorted. And so that proved that water has memory. It does get affected by the energy that it's exposed to. And we take that one step further. Food that we eat also contains water. So water is the carrier intention. So when you're preparing a meal, water is that element which is absorbing these subtle energies, and it therefore affects the food that you're going to eat.
Yes, and then we're mostly made, as humans made up mostly of water.
Exactly. So when you walk into a room and you communicate with different people, you're picking up their vibration and it's affecting you. There's actually a scientific basis for this. It's not just a woo-woo feeling or a hunch, but there's actually evidence, measurable evidence to say that yes, you are affected by this energy because your body is mostly water. Your body is 70% water, your brain is 90% water, your blood is 90% water. So water is the most important of all the elements, is water.
Yes. And so this leads me to the tough question.
Yeah.
How do you, because obviously the humans are the ones cooking the food, right? How do you work on making their intentions positive?
Yeah, that's a challenging one because there's so many factors to consider here. People are exposed to all sorts of energies. Their environment affects the way they feel and think. So there's nurture and nature. You may be born into a perfect situation, but you may get the wrong association, or you may be born into a very unfortunate situation, but you may then have the right nurturing. So you get the right association and right opportunities, which can change you. So there are many factors which come into play there which are out of our control, obviously. But what we can control is our own words, our own vibrations. We have control of that. So when you're communicating with people, try to use words which are uplifting, inspiring, motivating, and positive. Therefore, you create a positive impact on them on a subtle level. And this is where it gets back to the food yoga philosophy, because the foundation of the food yoga philosophy is this idea that the tongue is the most important of all the senses that we have. The way it's framed in the food yoga book is that evolution of consciousness, our consciousness begins to evolve once we learn how to master the tongue. It's a real secret to success. And as from being a monk for 14 years, from the age of 19 to 33, that was critically important for our success, was learning how to master the tongue, because the tongue has two functions, tasting and vibrating. What you speak and what you eat has a tremendous impact on your consciousness. So when we learn to master the tongue, we can learn to we can actually then start to raise our consciousness and become closer to our full potential, get to the point where we're realizing our full potential. So there's only so much we can do. We can impact our own personal surroundings. We can obviously control what we speak and what we eat. And then we do our best to encourage people to do the same. And at Food Yoga International, we're taking on that task of trying to shift consciousness, trying to teach people by practical example, giving them the experience of beautiful food prepared with a loving intention so they can have that experience. And when you experience a higher taste, this is a basic rule of a basic way that people operate is like when they experience a higher taste, they give up the lower taste. Like, for example, when I was a little boy, I played with toy cars, and now I drive a car. So I have a different sort of taste now in my older age. So when you give up the lower taste by experiencing a higher taste. So we need to expose people to these opportunities of experiencing delicious plant-based meals prepared with love, so that they have that experience, and they can give up the lower taste of foods which are prepared with toxic materials or the remains of dead animals and so on, so that they realize that that's not really food. Yes, you can eat it because our body is designed to also eat meat. I mean, it can accommodate meat, but it's not ideal. But the most important thing, which most people don't consider, because when you talk to people that eat meat, well, they say, well, you need protein and you need this and you need your B12. But they're never, ever considering the subtle aspect of that food. The violence, the sadness, the pain, which is also invested in that meat. You're also consuming that. That's one of the challenges that we have, is like shifting people's awareness of what food is. It's not simply just calories and proteins. It has a subtle aspect. And that is something which we also need to consider when we're talking about nourishing our body. We need to nourish our mind and soul as well.
Yeah, so that's key right now on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many people. I mean, it's not sustainable. The whole meat industry is really unsustainable. It's very artificial. Like, for example, if governments around the world, and because it all gets back to, it's all politics, the meat lobby are very powerful. They pay off politicians. They get certain rules passed, certain laws passed. If they weren't getting subsidized, if the meat industry was not getting subsidized by the governments of the world, your average hamburger would cost maybe $30. That's just a fact. Because it takes that much to produce. It's such an inefficient food. The amount of water and land and food that is required to nourish that cattle, that cow or that bull, who is, at a certain point in time has turned into like steaks on someone's plate, it's extremely inefficient in terms of like food processing, the cost to bring it to the table. So therefore, if it wasn't subsidized by government grants, your average steak or your average hamburger would be way, way more expensive. It's not sustainable.
Yes. Thinking of the food systems and also food yoga, especially right now, because there's a number of wars that are going on the planet, and lots of discord between people, and as we were talking before we started, every day you wake up, there's like bing, 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 this happens. This is just from maybe a personal standpoint, or even maybe an organizational standpoint. What crises have you sometimes like wanted to step back and rethink humanity?
I mean, the reality is the material world is, another way to look at the material world is like a hospital with a lot of sick people. We're in the minority here. We have to see the bigger picture. This is one of the things I try to teach people, is like stepping back and seeing the bigger picture. For example, when we look at a person, we can make a judgment call on who they are based on the clothes that they're wearing. And we could be very mistaken because of that. Or the color of their skin, or the way they speak. And we may be we could be completely off because of that. We're making a judgment call on a certain point in time in the lifespan of an individual who's experiencing a human life, and not seeing the bigger picture. The fact is that there are spiritual beings transmigrating through many forms. They've had many lives in the past and will have many lives in the future, because energy can't be destroyed. And so we are at our source, at our deepest level, we're spiritual energy. We're just animating physical form, going through this physical experience, this human experience, but we've had many, many lifetimes in the past. We'll have many in the future. So we're literally just making a judgment call on a very short moment in time. It's like looking at a book, reading one page and thinking you know the whole book by looking at one page, by reading one page, or one frame of a movie, a very long movie. So we're not seeing the complete picture. So we have to reframe, we have to like have that bigger, that greater perspective about the potential of humanity, who we really are in essence, and not just making a judgment. So the thing is, getting back to the original point about this material world, it's sort of like a hospital filled with sick people. And some people are nurses and doctors, and most people are simply just very sick in their patient bed, trying to figure out how to survive. And that's sort of the situation we've found ourselves in this material world. We're in the minority. The spiritual world is much greater. Most people are in the spiritual world. We're in the minority here in the material world. We're thinking this is everything, and it's really just one small part of a big picture. So we can't expect things to be perfect. We can't expect that somehow or other there'll be like heaven on earth. Yes, there'll be pockets of that, but as a whole, it's not the nature of the material world to be like that. It's meant here to like educate us, to give us that experience of trying to be the masters of our domain, like mini gods. We're given the opportunity to express ourselves, to dominate, and so on. And the lesson we're meant to learn from all this is that that's not the way to happiness. The path to happiness is through service, is by humbling ourselves and serving humanity and trying to lift people up and being the best version of ourselves, reconnecting to our spiritual potential. That's the purpose of human life. But we're taught by the system that the purpose of human life is to get ahead, to make money, to be famous, to be rich, to be strong and powerful and dominant, and that's not the purpose of human life. The purpose of human life is to learn how to serve, and to learn and to reconnect with our spiritual identity, to understand that we're more than just a physical form. We don't belong here. We need to get to a point where, at the time of death, we are aware of our true potential, and we can move on and evolve, and not actually have to come back to this physical space again. So this is all sort of connected to food yoga in the sense that we're not really pushing that idea so much. We're pushing the idea of like living up to your full potential as a human, treating your body like a temple, filling it with pure foods, clean foods, living a positive lifestyle, being a servant, seeing food as a powerful medium to like communicate, to connect with each other, seeing food as a way to nourish your mind and spirit. So we're sort of complementing and moving people in that direction. But getting back to, the main point here is that, and this is what I learned when I was a monk for 14 years, is that the purpose of human life is self-realization, understanding who we really are, asking those big questions, and getting back to our source, which is not here. This is just a temporary place that we're currently inhabiting, going through living out our karma and learning certain lessons, but it's not where we belong.
Yes, and I am happy that you were willing to take the deep dive and really explain everything from, I guess, pun intended and pun not intended, from the ground up. It's for people to understand what makes food yoga different than other relief programs. Is that you are really taking the whole person, literally inside and out and beyond, because we can't necessarily touch the soul.
Yeah, we're going much deeper because it's a very important. That's a very important distinction between us and the other food relief organizations, you won't hear this talk from the United Nations. They'll talk about, oh, we distributed 1 million tons of grains last year, and we dug these wells and this and that. And all that's good. That's okay. But it doesn't solve the bigger problem. The bigger problem is that we're stuck in this material world. And we have to go through birth, death, old age, and disease. That's something which we can't avoid as long as we're in this material realm, this physical experience. The body gets old, it gets diseased. We have to die. So we're trying to teach these spiritual concepts in a way which is very palatable, very accessible and non-sectarian, because they're very universal concepts. The idea that food is the foundation of every culture, that's a given. You look at any culture in the world and you can define it by the food that they prepare. Or you can look at a food and you'll immediately have a connection to that culture, whether it's pizza, Italy, whether it's empanadas, Colombia, whatever it is. So food is a foundation of culture. It's food, music, and dance. These are the foundations of every culture. So we're focusing on the food aspect and trying to elevate that part of the human experience. We have to eat food. Let's eat pure food. Let's eat food which can not only nourish our physical body, but nourish our mind and spirit. Let's eat food which is creating the least amount of violence. That's clean. It's creating the smallest environmental and footprint. It's better for the planet, better for the animals, better for the humanity at large. So we're trying to teach these concepts in a way which is very accessible to people. So Food Yoga is not only just a food relief organization, but it's an organization trying to shift consciousness and trying to move people in the right direction so that they can live their human life to its fullest, and they can continue progressing as a spiritual being in their next life.
I now have some fun questions, since to close out a little bit. I realize that you're an innovator. What drives you?
Again, it's sort of the creative side. I've always been, initially I was just traditional artist. And then as I became a monk, I fused that creative spirit with spirituality. And then when I wasn't a monk and I got married and I needed to make money, I fused my passion for money and success with spirituality and creativity. So I became a social entrepreneur. So whatever I did had to be done with purpose. It couldn't just be about me making money. There had to be some positive benefit for humanity, for the planet, and for the animals. So it's just the way that I operate, looking for ways to creatively express these higher concepts. I've written many books, as you pointed out. And I frame myself as the pragmatic spiritualist. So I'm a spiritual person, but I'm very down to earth as well. So I'm trying to make spirituality accessible to people without them feeling like they have to be religious. And you can be very spiritual without being religious. Religion is just a framework. It's a guideline for us on the spiritual path, but it's not necessary. What's necessary is getting in touch with who you really are, understanding that you are a unique person. When you were created, the mold was broken. There's no one like you. You have a unique way to contribute and serve humanity at large, and you just need to find that. And I found it through my charity work, through my writings, through my social entrepreneurship, trying to make the world a better place, inspire people to live their full potential. And that begins with, again, understanding that this human form is a blessing and it's a temple, and we should treat it as a temple. We should not fill it with impure foods. We should fill it with pure foods. We should use it properly because it's such a blessing. I mean, talking about in the minority, when I talk about, humanity, the physical experiences is small compared to like the spiritual dimension. This physical dimension is much smaller. But on a practical level in this material world, on this Earth planet, humanity is in the minority as well. I mean, there's so many other species of life, far more vast in population than humanity. So it's such a blessing to have a human form. We should not minimize that.
Yes, we should all appreciate it.
Boy, appreciate it.
And then, from the bigger aspect of when people, appreciate themselves, then they can appreciate others. And then, of course, then it has the ripple effect of bringing everybody together. Now, in what's your biggest lesson that you feel learned over the years in business and with people?
Biggest lesson is to be patient, because everyone's on their little path. Everyone's on their path. Everyone's got their things to learn. Everyone's got their experiences to have, their karma that they have to deal with, because what we've done in the past is affecting us in the future. You don't get away with anything. There is a law of karma, which is the universe's way of creating balance in the world. So when something's out of alignment, the universe, and that's nature's operating system is to always find balance. It's a basic rule of nature is to find balance, and that plays out as well in the human experience. Like when we act in a certain way, nature will arrange things. The universe will arrange things so that we get corrected, so that balance can be put back in place. So what you've done in the past will affect you in the future. Your desire. There are two factors which determine your future, and that is your desire and your what you deserve. So based on your past actions, you have certain things to expect, and also based on what you desire, what your focus is on, that will also determine your future. So getting back to the point was that patience is very important. So if you understand this idea, then we need to be patient with people, because people are on different paths. They have certain things to learn. They have a certain consciousness that they've developed. So you may present them all the most convincing arguments, but they're not ready. They're not ready to make that change. Their consciousness is not at a level where they can grasp, they can absorb that information or take it to heart. And they have certain karmic lessons still to learn. So, for example, you may convince someone, you've got to go vegan because of this reason and that reason. And you can have all the most convincing arguments, but that person may not be consciously prepared for that, and not karmically prepared for it. They've still got to have that experience of eating meat. And that's one thing which is a little hard to accept initially, but this comes with experience, understanding that everyone's on a very long journey, and we have to be patient, and we can just plant seeds and try to inspire people, encourage people to be their best. But at the end of the day, they've got to fly their own plane.
This is true. If you were going to do life over again, what would you change?
If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't be as hard on myself. I would be more compassionate with myself and patient with myself. I would also try to be more humble and realize that I don't have all the answers, and life is a journey and wisdom is a process. There's certain things I did which I wish I didn't do, and you can't change that. But again, it's also part of my karma. So it was meant to be that way, so that I learned those lessons, and I could then teach them to someone else. But patience, I guess it's humility and to be a little bit more kind to myself and not so hard on myself. Because one of the challenges I had when I was a monk is that we were very strict. It was a very strict lifestyle. And we denied ourselves so much. We lived according to the rules and regulations and the demands of other people, the institution. And it was a very hard lifestyle, very strict, very, very austere. And looking back, I realized I probably could have been a bit more lenient and not so robotic in that experience, because that did affect me later on in life. It took a while to break through all those conditionings, break through that. Even when I decided not to be a monk, I got married, I still had certain conditioning that I had to deal with because of that experience.
That's a good point to be easier on your own. So a lot of people I think struggle with that.
Yeah, we're going to be patient. And again, it's like, Anna Maria, seeing the big picture. This is a lesson I've learned. I'm now 60. It's stepping back and seeing the big picture. As I was trying to mention earlier, that when we make a judgment call on a particular person based on their externals, when we think we know them, that's just downright foolishness, because we don't know the whole story. We don't know their whole history in this human life. We don't know their history beyond this one lifetime, what they were in the past, and the lessons that they're having to go through now because of that. So it's important to always step back, see the big picture. Don't just make a judgment call on initial micro level sort of information. Always step back and see the bigger picture.
And it seems even with yourself is the lesson that you learned, and because you're only as a human seeing yourself in those months or the year or whatever, but you don't know from where you were at 10 years old that at 30 you're a totally different person, and then at 40 you're a different person, and it says, and at 60 you're a different person, and so you judge yourself without seeing the bigger picture as well.
Yeah, exactly. We're evolving constantly. Nothing remains the same. Energy is constantly moving.
So what's your biggest goal? Let's go on this new decade of life.
Going forward, I want to just leave a positive legacy. So I'm doing whatever I can with the skills that I have, wisdom that I have, the tools that I have to leave a positive legacy on the world. I really do like writing books, because I feel like that's my most effective way to communicate. Even better than speaking or drawing is just writing. I get to the real core of things when I can write. I'm much more effective in my writing in communicating than speaking. So I enjoy that, and then demystifying spiritual concepts so that they're accessible, and then complementing them with scientific research to back them up. I find that very fascinating and a very interesting pursuit. For example, when I talk about intention, people's initial response would be, well, that's just intangible. How do you prove that, right? But actually there is proof. There is scientific research that intention, your mind, your thoughts affect physical reality. That's provable. So that I found that, those sort of things like that are very interesting to me, where I'm making the intangibles, the spiritual, accessible to the lay person. So that's why I mentioned I'm trying to be like the pragmatic spiritualist. And food yoga is just one of those channels, one of those vehicles that I use to share that spiritual understanding. And it's an important one because, as we talked about at the beginning, food is the center of all culture. It's something which drives us all. It's an important way. It's the most powerful way to communicate is with food. And that's why getting back to the initial point is like the tongue is the most important sense of all the senses. And if you can master the tongue, you can master all the other senses and really elevate your consciousness.
So what's next for food yoga?
So Food Yoga International, we're just trying to build our capacity mostly. We're clear on our mission. We're very effective in what we do in terms of like feeding people around the world. We have projects in 65 countries. We're serving around 1 million meals a day. So we're very good at that. We've sort of locked down that solution. But I want to just try and expand the capacity. And the focus right now is trying to teach people more about food yoga, the food yoga concept, so that they can embrace this idea of becoming a food yogi. So like creating more food yogis in the world. And that, I believe, is not only beneficial for the charity, but beneficial to humanity at large, that if more people can take on this role, this consciousness of being a food yogi. And when we talk about food yogi, break it up into 2 words. So obviously it's food, but yogi means to connect. It comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, Y-U-J, which means to yoke or to connect, to unite. So when we talk about food yoga or food yogi, it's like using food as a way to unite our mind, body, spirit, using food as a vehicle for uniting us together as one family. And that to me is like critically important. And so that is, we want to expand that idea of promoting food yoga philosophy, creating more food yogis, building our capacity, financial capacity, so that we can expand that educational component of the charity. That's really the future.
And sounds exciting. I like the educational component. When I was on your website, I was looking that you guys have been working on teaching people how to garden, and educating them more and more about growing their own food so that they can take control of their own health, nutrition, and then also just have the whole sustainability aspect. I think, of course, gardening is extremely important skill to have for obvious reasons. So I'm sure that's an exciting project that you're enjoying.
Yeah, I am. It's important. We want to expand that educational component, like the practical with gardening, and also the philosophical, where just changing people's mindsets when they're preparing food at home, empowering women, mothers to take back control of the dinner table. So when we're eating food, we're not just looking at the TV or looking at the phone and we're all disconnected, but food is the great uniter. We're all united around a meal and we're talking to each other as a family. So all of these things are part of the story that we're trying to tell. Is we believe it's going to play an important role in improving the lives of humanity, people around the world, if they can just make food a more important part of their spiritual evolution and not see it as something that you just fill the body and fuel the body and get on to the more important work. No, the whole eating experience is a very important part of our spiritual development.
Yes, and my final question, you probably answered it 1,000,000 times, but as a good closer, can you finish the sentence? A meal means?
A meal means an opportunity to nourish my mind, body, and soul. Is an opportunity to unite with my family and friends. It is also an opportunity for me to connect with the divine through gratitude and appreciation of the blessing of food that nature has provided us these amazing ingredients, which is now turned into a meal for myself. Having gratitude for that, gratitude for nature, gratitude for the divine, for God, So that a meal is an opportunity for self-improvement, for uniting, and for connecting with mind, body, and spirit, and connecting with the divine.
Thank you, Paul, for your time and insight. If you'd like to learn more about Paul Turner and food yoga industries, go to ffl.org. If you have a passion for an unserved community, a social justice problem, or simply want to change minds, contact Project Good Work at projectgood.org to start your project of change today. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Project Good, where we're focused on what matters.